single piece of paper, handwritten, unsigned by any king, backed by nothing. A French nobleman carried it from Paris to Jerusalem, 3,000 miles through Byzantine territory, Muslim-controlled ports, and mountain passes where armed robbery wasn't a crime. It was commerce. Carrying silver on that road wasn't a financial risk. Transporting silver along that road didn't represent a financial risk, but it did represent the risk of never reaching its destination. He arrived in Jerusalem, walked into a fortified tower, handed over the paper, and walked out with silver he had never seen before in his life. The transaction cleared, instantly, silently, without moving a single coin. Here is the paradox. The Knights Templar were a military order sworn to poverty. By their own founding charter, ratified at the Council of Troyes in January 1129, a Templar knight owned nothing. The institution they built became the dominant financial intermediary of the medieval world. Men who owned nothing personally controlled the liquidity architecture of 3 continents, not through gold, not through territory, through a mechanism so precise that its core logic has never been replaced, only renamed. By the end of this episode, you will understand exactly how a piece of paper moved value across borders without moving a single physical asset, and why the same architecture that made it work in 1148 is still embedded in the banking system processing your transfers. The mechanism is older than you think, and it never stopped running. In 1307, the French crown was broke, not struggling, broke. King Philip IV of France had spent years fighting wars he couldn't afford. England, Flanders, one campaign after another. And now the bills were due, and there was nothing left to pay them with. But Philip had a problem bigger than empty coffers. The institution that held his financial lifeline, the one that had been managing the crown's accounts, processing royal taxes and funding French military campaigns for over a century, was not a bank. It was not a government agency. It was a religious military order, the same order of warrior monks that had just taken a vow of personal poverty, the Knights Templar. And Philip IV owed them everything. He didn't negotiate. On the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, royal agents arrested every Templar in France, simultaneously in every city at the same hour. The charges were fabricated, the trial was controlled, the outcome was decided before it began. 7 years later, the order was dissolved, its leaders executed, and its assets officially transferred to the Knights Hospitaller. The word officially is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Because when the royal agents arrived at the Paris temple that morning, something was missing. The historian Julien Terry-Astruc, analyzing the trial records documented in the Archives Nationales series J413, found a detail the confiscation records cannot explain. A Templar named Jean de Chalon testified that the preceptor of France, Gérard de Villiers, had been tipped off before the arrests and had already moved the assets out of Paris. The vault had furniture, robes, ceremonial objects, no financial records, no accounts, nothing that showed where the money was. The network had already moved. That is the consequence. Now we need to understand how the system actually worked. To understand what the Templars built, you need to understand the problem they were solving. In the 12th century, moving money across long distances was dangerous. You couldn't wire a transfer. You couldn't use a card. The only way to move value was to physically carry metal, gold or silver, across roads controlled by bandits, through ports controlled by rival powers, over mountain passes where no law applied. Other systems had tried to solve this problem before. Arab merchants used the Hawala network. You give money to a broker in Cairo, he sends a message to a broker in Baghdad, who pays your associate on the other side. Chinese traders had a similar system. But both had the same critical flaw. 2 independent brokers, 2 separate businesses, 2 points where the chain could break. If either broker failed or simply decided not to pay, the transaction collapsed. That's counterparty risk. The danger that the person on the other side of your contract simply doesn't deliver. The Templars eliminated that flaw entirely. Their system had no independent brokers. The preceptory in Paris and the preceptory in Jerusalem were not two separate businesses working together. They were two offices of the exact same organization, same leadership, same rules, same books. When that French nobleman handed over his paper in Jerusalem, he wasn't trusting a stranger. He was dealing with the same institution he had walked into in Paris. The paper wasn't a promise from a broker. It was an internal transfer instruction from one office to another inside the same house. But how did the Jerusalem office know the paper was real? Every letter the Templars issued carried authentication markers, identifiers that only their own commanders knew how to read. The historian Malcolm Barber, in his foundational study The New Knighthood, documents this system, though he notes the exact mechanics are still debated since the Templars' central archive was lost in the 16th century. Here's what we do know: a perfect copy of the letter was worthless. Without the internal verification key, known only to Templar commanders, the paper was just paper. This is what historians call the immutability layer. The value of the instrument was locked to the institution that created it. You couldn't separate one from the other. The hidden economics of the system were brutally simple. If you were outside the network, you had nothing. Value existed only inside the network that could authenticate it, invisible and inaccessible to everyone else. Here's where the system becomes something else entirely. Think about what was actually happening. Thousands of pilgrims and crusaders were depositing silver with the Templars before leaving for the Holy Land. Some collected it when they arrived. Some collected only part of it. Many never came back at all. That gap between what came in and what went out created something the Templars almost certainly never planned for. A permanent pool of uncommitted silver sitting in their vaults at all times. The historian Thomas W. Blomqvist in the Journal of Economic History identified this float as the engine that powered the entire Templar financial operation. Because the Templars didn't just hold that silver, they lent it. They charged a fee, not interest technically. The church had banned interest, so the Templars called it an administration fee, risk management. It complied with the rules. On paper, the poverty vow covered individual knights. It said nothing about what the institution itself could accumulate. Personal poverty, institutional wealth. That legal distinction was the institutional secret the founding charter never mentioned out loud. These were the liquidity cycles that ended up funding 3 continents, without any king's permission and without anyone officially noticing. To see exactly how this worked in practice, look at the year 1163. A Genoese merchant named Rubaldo Bisaccia, documented in the cartulary of the notary Giovanni Scriba, the oldest surviving notarial register in Western Europe, held today in the Archivio di Stato di Genova, needed to move silver from Genoa to the Crusader ports of the Levant to buy Syrian silk. He had 2 options. Both were bad. Overland. Every baron along the route charged a toll at every border. He'd lose money before leaving Italy. By sea, pirates operating under loose Norman protection were waiting for exactly this kind of cargo. Either way, he'd lose between 15% and 30% of his capital before reaching the market. He walked into the Templar preceptory in Genoa, deposited his silver, got a letter. In Acre, he handed the letter to the local Templar commander. Less than a day later, after a verification process whose exact mechanics remain debated, though Barber confirms authentication markers were used, he walked out with the equivalent in local silver, minus the Templars' fee. The Templars had moved nothing. 2 numbers changed in 2 ledgers, one in Genoa, one in Acre. That's all. And for that, they collected their fee. This is what forensic accounting of medieval commerce actually reveals. The Templars weren't moving money. They were moving trust. And trust, when it's properly institutionalized, works exactly like money, without the weight, without the risk, without leaving a trail that anyone outside the network could follow. Ancient arbitrage in its purest form, the entire gap between the cost of moving metal and the cost of moving paper, captured completely by the institution that controlled the paper. The Templars kept two sets of books. The letter traveled with the depositor. That was the external record, the part the client could see. The internal record was something else entirely. It lived in the preceptory's livre de compte, a closed ledger, locked away, accessible only to the treasurer and the commander of each house. Those ledgers are gone. Malcolm Barber confirms in The New Knighthood that the Order's central archive was lost in the 16th century. What survived in the trial proceedings, analyzed by historian Anne Gilmore Bryson in her scholarship on the Templar records, are not the ledgers themselves, just references to them, testimony from arrested Templars describing what they looked like, inventory lists that record the existence of financial books without ever saying what was written inside. The royal commissioners catalogued everything in the Paris Temple vault: furniture, vestments, objects, the financial records of an institution that had run the French crown's accounts for over a century. Not there. What they found, and what they didn't find, is all documented in the Archives Nationales, Series J 413. They weren't running a simple ledger. They were running a financial operating system, and someone walked out with the source code before the doors came down. But here is the question the mechanism still doesn't answer. The Templar network was processing transactions for 3 monarchies at the same time. It held accounts for the Pope himself. That kind of operation doesn't run on trust alone. It requires every single node, every preceptory, every treasurer, every commander across 14 countries to follow the exact same protocol every time, without fail, without a central authority that any king could pressure, bribe, or seize. The question isn't how the system worked. The question is, who made sure it never broke down? And the answer to that question leads directly to the most sophisticated exercise in elite capital management the medieval world ever produced. The Templar system didn't run itself. Behind every letter of credit, behind every ledger entry, behind every transaction that moved silver from Paris to Jerusalem without touching the road, there was one man. Not the Grand Master, not the military commanders, the treasurer. The man who controlled the money, managed the crown's accounts, and decided how the float was deployed on any given day. That man had more real power than most kings. Between 1200 and 1307, the Paris Temple was the central bank of France before central banks existed. The crown's tax revenues flowed through it. Royal debts were issued against deposits held in its vaults. King Philip II Augustus trusted the Templars with the entire French treasury while he left for the Crusades. Not a royal fortress, not a government vault, a building run by monks who had taken a vow of poverty. The institution that controls the records holds more real power than the sovereign whose name is on the coins. In 1250, King Louis IX of France was captured in Egypt. His ransom was 400,000 livres, more than the entire annual income of the French crown. To free him, someone had to pay. Fast. The Templars had offices and silver reserves on both sides of the Mediterranean. When the ransom was agreed, they didn't load ships with silver and sail across the sea. They didn't need to. The silver was already there. The Templar office in the Middle East handed the Egyptians what was sitting in their local vault. The Paris office wrote in their books, "The crown owes 400,000 livres." No metal crossed the sea. No convoy was organized. The Egyptians received their silver from a vault that was already next door. Louis walked free. 2 ledger entries, 2 cities, 1 transaction. Brother Haymard, the temple treasurer from approximately 1253 to 1264, then managed the crown's accounts for the decade that followed, tracking every disbursement, reconciling positions across multiple currencies, keeping royal finance operational across 2 continents simultaneously. 2 different treasurers. 1 continuous system. The mechanism didn't depend on who was running it. It ran because the architecture was stronger than any individual inside it. But the real test of that system came 40 years later, and it came from inside the kingdom itself. The year is 1295. Brother Jean de Tours is the treasurer of the Paris temple, and the kingdom around him is quietly falling apart. King Philip IV has just done something dangerous. He suspended production of the gros tournois, the most trusted silver coin in Europe, and started minting replacement coins with less silver inside. Not a small reduction. By 1302, French coins contained 1/3 of the silver they had carried at the start of his reign. 2/3 of the currency's real value had been quietly transferred to the royal treasury through the minting process itself. Dante, who was alive at the time, placed Philip in the Paradiso for exactly this. There shall be seen the woe that on the Seine he brings by falsifying of the coin. Everyone holding French currency lost, silently, invisibly. Everyone except the Templars. Jean de Tours held temple accounts in English sterling, Venetian grosso, and Genoese silver, all harder currencies than the collapsing tournois. While the crown's treasury bled purchasing power with every new minting cycle, the temple's multi-currency position held. The king reset the currency downward. The institution holding other currencies reset its exposure to 0. Philip needed the temple's harder reserves to stabilize his own finances. He needed to borrow from the institution he was simultaneously destroying through debasement. Jean de Tours extended the credit. The rate was never recorded. The following year, Philip renewed the temple's royal charter without modification. The treasurer had just demonstrated something no army could prove. The institution controlling the financial architecture had more durable leverage than the sovereign controlling the army. That was 1295. 12 years later, that same sovereign came for them. In 1307, Philip IV was drowning in debt, and his biggest creditor was the Templar order itself. He owed them more than he could ever repay. So he made a calculation. It was cheaper to destroy them than to pay them back. He fabricated charges of heresy, arrested every Templar in France in a single morning, seized their assets. He made one critical mistake. He destroyed the institution, not the knowledge inside it. The people who actually ran the system, the treasurers, the administrators, the men who understood how to move value across borders without moving metal, didn't disappear. They went to Florence, to Genoa, to Venice. And there, inside the Bardi and Peruzzi banking companies, the same system reappeared. Same letter of credit instruments, same correspondent network logic, same architecture. British History Online documents it directly. These Italian banks expanded their operations, especially after the suppression of the Templars. The name changed. The method didn't. On November 22, 1307, Pope Clement V issued the Bull Pastoralis Preeminentiae, ordering the arrest of Templars across every Christian kingdom. 17 countries, 7 years of proceedings. The financial charges that appeared in the early interrogations quietly disappeared from the formal trial. What replaced them were accusations of heresy, idolatry, denial of Christ. The mechanism of the institution was never put on trial. Only the institution was. The Chinon parchment, a Vatican document rediscovered by paleographer Barbara Fraile in 2001, catalogued under Archivum Archis Armarium D217-218, reveals that Pope Clement V privately absolved Jacques de Molay and 4 other senior Templars in 1308. The absolution was conditional. It was never made public. The trial continued regardless. On March 18, 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master, was burned at the stake on the Île aux Juifs, a sandbank in the Seine, chosen because its isolation made the execution visible from both banks without giving the crowd access to intervene. The order was gone. The operators had already left. The system closed. The protocol survived. The institution was gone. But the logic that ran it was already somewhere else. And you can see it right now. Pick up your phone, open your banking app, make an international transfer. Somewhere in that transaction, there's a field that says intermediary bank. That field exists because your bank and the recipient's bank don't have a direct relationship. They can't just hand money to each other. So they use a third institution, a correspondent bank, that holds accounts for both of them. When you send money internationally, your bank doesn't actually send anything. It adjusts a number in the correspondent's ledger. The correspondent adjusts another number on the other side. The money never moves. Only the entries change. Sound familiar? That is the Templar mechanism running right now. On Swift infrastructure instead of parchment. But the architecture is identical. Two endpoints with no direct relationship, connected through a single intermediary that controls the verification, processes the transaction as an internal ledger adjustment, and charges a fee for the privilege. The Basel Committee on Banking Supervision published a report in 2016 identifying the biggest vulnerability in the global financial system. Their conclusion: the entire correspondent banking network, which processes approximately $5 trillion in transactions every day, runs through fewer than 30 major institutions. Remove those institutions and the network stops. 14 Templar commanderies controlled medieval European finance. Fewer than 30 banks control it today. The geometry hasn't changed in 9 centuries. In 2024, the Bank for International Settlements, the institution that sets the rules for global banking, published something called Project Agora. Stripped of the technical language, it describes a system where central banks around the world move value between each other through a single shared verification layer. No correspondent banks needed, no intermediaries. Just tokenized entries adjusting across a closed institutional network, with the BIS itself sitting at the center, controlling the verification point. The Templars called their verification system a cipher. The BIS calls it a smart contract. The mechanism is the same. What changed is who sits at the center. Every international transfer you make today passes through an architecture that was not designed by JP Morgan or Swift or the Federal Reserve. It was designed, tested, refined, and proved viable at scale by a group of warrior monks who had taken a personal vow of poverty. 9 centuries before the first central bank opened its doors, the Templars didn't invent invisible money. They proved it works. They proved that value can move without moving. That trust, when it's properly institutionalized, is more durable than the metal it replaces. Philip IV thought he had destroyed the system when he arrested its operators in 1307. He hadn't. The mechanism had already left the building, installed somewhere else, running under different management. It is still running. If you want to understand how financial systems actually work, subscribe to the Financial Archaeology. Every episode excavates a mechanism that still has weight in the world you live in today. Next episode: before the Templar letter of credit, before the first gold coin, before any sovereign put his face on metal, there was a shell, small, smooth, almost weightless, and it built the world's first truly global monetary system, connecting Africa, Asia, and the Americas simultaneously. The Shell Game: how cowries built the world's first global currency. The mechanism is more precise than you expect, and the collapse, when it came, followed a logic that economists still argue about today: If the Templar credit network was functionally more powerful than the French crown it served, and the historical record suggests it was, what does that tell us about who actually controls a monetary system? The institution that issues the currency, or the institution that moves it? Drop your answer below. I read everyone.